Hello and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing the Traveler cowl. This is the second one I knit. I used hand spun for both of my cowls, and I wanted to try it out in two different weights. I love to have different options like that in my patterns when I can. I like to have a lot of sizes and a couple different options. It doesn't work out for every pattern, but I've been trying to do it more, and especially for things like this. It's not too hard to be able to do that. So anyways, especially with hand spun, I know for me, I don't always want to try to make a specific yarn. I just want to make some yarn and then kind of see what I can use it for. I know that's not true of every spinner. Some people are very methodical and planned with their spins. For me, I think because I already knit for work, I want my hand spun to be intuitive, and what it is. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include a couple different yarn weights for this pattern. So this is my lighter weight one. This one is around a fingering weight. Where my other one was closer to like a DK worsted, if memory serves. So anyways, I will of course throw the pattern link in the show notes below in case you want to check it out, and let's jump into some questions. I don't know why I don't think to drink my water before I hit record. It's like it's like this little Pavlovian response that I hit record and I'm like, my hands are dry and I'm thirsty. I probably need to blow my nose. All right. So question number one is about the shift cowl. I have made 6 shift cowls. I have to say, it just warms my heart. That pattern I think is probably my main pattern that people make on repeat. I have heard from people, one lady I think has knit 11. So I am just so tickled. There's no greater compliment than when somebody chooses to knit your pattern, not only once, but more than once. And 6 times, that's amazing. I hope it fills you up each time you knit it. And okay, back to the question. I have one problem though. The 2 edges for the seam at the back of the neck always end up different lengths. I've had differences of up to 3/4 of an inch. The shorter edge is the one by the cast on corner. It's much tighter. I can make up for the difference when I seam, and it's at the back of the neck, so not a huge deal, but I'd like it to be perfect. Is there something I can do when I make my 7th shift cowl to get these edges to be more even? So let's talk about why that's happening, and then that'll give you a couple ideas of what you can do. So basically, when you're increasing in that cowl, it uses a make one increase. And so to do a make one, we are going between 2 existing stitches and we lift up the bar that connects them. So that bar is the same yarn that made the stitch before it and the stitch after it. And we're lifting that up and we're creating a new stitch in between them. Because of that, we are tightening up those 2 stitches a little bit. Now, in general, make one is such a fabulous increase because it's really pretty invisible and doesn't have to use an existing stitch to make it. But it can snug things up a little bit. So that's what's happening on that first edge, your tight edge, as you mentioned it is tightening up a little bit because of that increase. Now on the opposing edge, there is a matching amount of rows. So they should be the same length, but on the other edge, you're doing a decrease, and that decrease is not tightening anything up. And so that's why there can be that little discrepancy. So what can we do about that? Well, you could try to do it looser. You could even play with maybe going up a needle size. That's gonna throw it's a cowl, so you don't have to worry too much about it, but if you wanted to play around with it, and because you've knit so many of them, you could try doing section 1 with 1 needle size up and then dropping down back to your normal. I don't think that there would be such a massive shift in gauge that it's going to throw the whole cowl off, and that might help loosen up that edge. You could even, just when you get to that edge, use a bigger needle just to work those few edge stitches, and then you could even just have a needle tip that's bigger. Try that out. You can also, on the opposing edge, on your decrease edge, you could try to give an extra little tug to keep things tightened up. But usually what I do in situations like that is I use blocking to help me even things out. So I will measure to make sure I'm getting them the same length, and I would stretch my tight edge as far as I can and then line up my other edge that does have more give because it's a little bit looser. And what I'll even do is kind of scrunch it up into the dimension I need, and then I just pat it, and it will dry a bit shorter than if it's all stretched out from blocking. Because that's the thing too, is that when our knits are wet, they can be pretty stretchy. They can open up maybe even more than we want them. So don't be afraid to, what I call the smush and tap, and get it into the dimensions you want it and then tap it. That can happen a lot. So one of my pet peeves is when ribbing on a sweater hem blows out, when it kind of flares out instead of staying in that nice, neat, tidy ribbing we want it to be in. This can especially happen with like superwash yarns. So I always keep an eye on it, especially depending on what kind of yarn I'm using. And I almost always, when I'm blocking a sweater, I've washed it, whatnot, I lay it out and then I kind of smush it to where I want it, and then I tap it to smooth it out. And you might be surprised about how much you can kind of manipulate your knits post blocking. So that's what I would do to give it a try. I would probably manipulate it more with blocking than I would worrying too much about, forgot my word for a minute, than trying to fiddle around with needle sizes to keep that one size loose. But play around, especially if you like the pattern, you want to keep knitting it. Experiment. I do that all the time when I'm spinning, is I just try things out. see what's gonna happen. I do it in my design work too. I am somebody who has to try something out to know if it's gonna work or if I'm gonna like it. My brain can't decide without me getting in there and experimenting. So that's what I would suggest, is kind of playing around with it. But hopefully kind of understanding why that might be happening for you might help too. And at the very least, I would try giving maybe a little extra tug on those decreases, because that's the thing too that I've noticed. I really learned it with brioche. In brioche, to decrease, we end up usually stacking stitches on top of each other, and there can just be a lot of slack left in the yarn that's easy to miss if you're not paying attention, and you really have to pull that slack out of the yarn while you're knitting. I mean, don't pull that yarn so hard that it snaps, but give it a tug, because that is going to tidy up your decreases. So that is one thing you could try, is just give a little extra tug when you're on that decrease edge to kind of snug everything up and see if that helps. All right, next question is about the Broom sweater. I am currently knitting away on my Broom sweater collar and have questions about collar modifications. Usually I have a strong preference for crew neck due to neck sensitivity, but you made a great case for this collar being open enough to not bother sensitive necks. So I'm interested in trying it. But I've also heard taller collars can be less flattering on people with rounder faces like myself. So I have nerves. Anyway, if I knit it and decide after a while that it's not working on me, is it possible to re-knit it shorter, or will that not look right in this design? Sometimes style of neck is important relative to the construction and weight of sweaters, but other times not so much. How do you tell? Okay, so interesting about the taller neck and the round face. I think I have a round shaped face and have never heard that. But I think it's great that you want to explore and try it and see if you like it and you're comfortable in it. So here's the thing about Broom. It is top down. So you are a bit locked in once you've knit the collar. I think what I would do is, in Broom, you knit it top down, and then you actually connect your cast on edge with the last edge of the collar before you go into the raglan shaping by knitting. You knit it together to kind of seam it closed as you go. I would not do that. I would knit the collar and then just go right into the shaping. I wouldn't do where you fold it down and kind of graft as you go, like I explained in the pattern. Instead, I would leave it as is. Then once you have finished the sweater, and don't be afraid to try it on as you go and just see how you're feeling in it. And if you try it on and you're like, ooh, I think I'm liking this, keep going. One of the things too, again, I haven't heard that about face shape and collar height. But one thing I kind of wonder is if they're talking more about like a turtleneck. Like a high collar, like this one, it's not gonna snug up on you. So I think hopefully you will like it. But try on your yoke as you go. That way, if you get to the arm separation and you're not loving it, you do have the option to tear out. But if you do not graft as you go and you wait to the end, what you can then do is I would use a smooth contrast color, or at least contrasting enough that you can see it when you look inside your sweater to, what's the word? I want to say tack it down, but there's another word. Whip stitch. I would whip stitch your collar down. So you fold it in and just do a whip stitch. And that way it's loose, so you can wear it for a little while. You can see what you think about that high collar. Now, let's say worst comes to worst, and you're like, yeah, the high collar is not for me. Then you can under your whip stitch, clip your cast on, pull it out, put those... I'm making this sound dramatic. It's not that dramatic, I promise. Put your stitches back on a needle, and then you can choose to, you know what I would do? Here's what I would do. Everything I just said, but I would only go to maybe half the length of the tall collar, and then I would put those stitches back on the needle and bind them off. And then I would fold the collar back in and re-sew it down so you just have a regular height, like crew neck folded collar. And I think that would look great. And I don't think it would be that hard to do. The thing about tearing back from a cast on is you're going in the wrong direction. Usually when we tear back in something, we're going back the way we knit. We're just unknitting, but you're going to be going from the cast on edge in. And so that's where it can be a little tricky and uncomfortable. Just know it's probably going to be a half stitch off because you're going in the wrong direction. That's the weirdest part about it, is there tends to be a little funny thing like that, but it's not going to matter that much as long as you don't lose any of your stitches and you can get them back on the needle and bind them off. You're going to fold that in anyways. So like if it looks a little funky, who cares? Because you're going to fold it in and you're going to tack it right back down. And I would say once you've made your decision, if you want to reinforce a little, go in and do more than just a loose whip stitch, like kind of make sure that everything's secure. But that way you're going to end up with just a crew neck. You absolutely can knit Broom with just a crew neck. I would recommend doing about half the height of the collar, and I would still do a folded collar on it. A folded crew neck I think would look so nice. So that's what I would do, and I think it'll be totally fine. So that way you kind of have some options. Question number 3, I get this one a lot. So this one is about yarn management, and this one's for the rad plaid cowl, but I also get it for the tessellated patterns. And spoiler alert, tessellated and rad plaid, same stitch pattern. So do you have tips for yarn management for the rad plaid cowl? My 3 skeins are getting super twisted. And if I'm being honest, I have 4 skeins because I added a string of sequin yarn, so that's adding to my issue. I love the project, but the Surrey keeps getting wound really tightly around the other colors. Now the project is getting less portable because I need to keep the Surrey and the MC out so I can keep them untangled every row. Help! So I absolutely would be pulling all those yarns out of your bag. I would not keep them in your bag while you're knitting. And so this is not a walk and knit project. This is it can still be portable. Like if you're going to your knit group, you're going to the coffee shop, whatever, I just would still pull all those little yarn balls out of your bag, and I would separate them on either side of you. So I would have 2 on one side, 2 on the other for you, since you threw in the bonus sequined one. And here is my biggest, most helpful thing I can say. Don't twist. So when we are working in the round like you are with the rad plaid cowl, we're going like this, and we tend to keep doing this with our needles. Well, that takes all of our yarn tails and winds them around each other. So what I do is I work around the round, but once I get to the other side, I flip it back. So I'm doing a rotate like this instead of just continuously working around like this, and that will help the issue. Now you are working with multiple colors of yarn. 2 is very, very manageable, but I will say 3, it does get a little trickier. 4, yes ma'am. So that rotating will help. Every once in a while, when I worked on all of my tessellated patterns, I would stop probably every 10 rounds or so and just make sure none of mine were doing the spiral around, because you do have that third one, in your case 4. And so sometimes even just having the 2 on one side, keeping them separated really helps because they're just not as prone to it then. But you do still have a couple next to each other. So then every once in a while, and I just sit, and when they are around you, then I can easily grab, I can move this ball over here, this ball over here to untangle them, and it's much less of a headache than if they've been allowed to twist around each other. It might also be a good idea. Have you ever seen, oh, I have one. Somebody gave me one at Rhinebeck. They're so clever, but I don't have it right here. I just had it right here the other day, and then I moved it. Would it be in here? Like I literally looked at it. Well, poopy darn. Let me look in one more spot. Oh! Perseverance pays off. Okay, have you ever seen one of these? So this amazing knitter at Rhinebeck made them. So this is just out of stretchy like jersey fabric. People will also get them off of, I'm sure somebody sells them for this purpose. I'm sure there's, you can buy them ready-made. I've also seen people take them off of fancy fruit, like those big pears that come with that net on them. You can use that. But basically what you do is you put your skein, boop, and now it's gonna keep it organized. It's really ideal for center pole. As you know, or you may know, I'm not a big center pole person because I don't like yarn vomit. But even with this is from the outside and I can still pull. But even just for when your yarn's in your bag to keep it from jumping around and turning into a crazy mess, you might find, I mean, and how cute. It's like a little cozy yarn cake. So there is an idea. All right. After months of seeing you spindle spin, I was inspired and finally bought my first supported spindle at Maryland Sheep and Wool. Congratulations! I have started spinning and I'm so excited about the process. So far, when my cup is full, I am just winding it onto a ball on my thumb and starting again. I know everyone does things a little different, and even the resources I've read or watched say different things. So I'm curious, how do you spin on your supported spindles? Do you use a lead or start? Make your own? How do you start and build up your cup? When do you know when your spindle is full? I've also seen you use little bobbins to put spun singles on. It's a little tongue twister. Can you tell us more about the process and how you do it? Whew! I guess basically I want an episode just on your spindle spinning. This probably could fill an episode, but I will try to keep it a little contained. So I will show you. Okay, as far as getting going, I do not use a leader. I basically take my fiber and pull out one of my spindles here, and shockingly, I don't really have a little bit of fluff right here. Well, poopy darn. Okay, I'm sorry. That's the second time I've said that this episode. I will refrain from saying that again. Woo! All right, these are just locks, but it'll do the trick. So basically what I do, get me out of there, is I take a little lock and I start to twist it. And just right from my whatever I'm spinning. I just take that fiber and I start to twist it. And then I take my spindle. I think I have to hide my face. And then I start wrapping just with that little bit of hand twist I put in there, and I start wrapping it. And I keep doing that until it has enough. I don't have a dish right here. Oh, I do. Okay. This is my Hansen spinner right here, which I've been plying on. I have some fun things to show you in a little bit. But so I basically get that going. I wish I was wearing white. And then I just start twisting it. And what I do is I kind of hold my hand around while adding more twist to that little bit. And then once there's enough just to stabilize it, then I will start spinning. And the more you get going, the more you can wrap around this little temporary cop here. And then you can get it going. So that is how I start every spindle spin. As far as maintaining my cup, my temporary cup, all that stuff, when I first started support spindle spinning, I did not do a temporary cup. I spun right on the big cup. It was just easier for me to manage, and I was going so slow and learning that just worked really well for me. Once I got the hang of it, I understood the helpfulness of a temporary cup, and I started doing that. So your cup, you usually store somewhere on your shaft. For supported spindle, I always do it kind of close to whatever kind of whirl situation, bead, whatever's happening down towards the bottom. And so the point of a temporary cup is that you can spin faster. And so you're spinning, you quickly wind it on, spin, quickly wind on. And then once it's bigger, I will then wind it onto my hand like this, doing this butterfly motion to rewind it down into my permanent cup, which you can do a little slower, keeping things tidy so it's not a tangly mess when you do want to get your singles off of your spindle. So that's what I do. Now, as far as how full I let spindles get, I have a bag of finished spindles right here. I'm working on a big sweater spindle spin because I'm crazy like that. And here are some examples of what I consider full spindles. So this is about how full, use a different style, I like to get my spindles. Basically, personal preference. It's really up to you. When I decide I've had enough is when they start to get a little harder to spin. Because what I notice is as they get to about this point, my hand fatigues a little quicker as I'm trying to flick. And I start feeling like there's not really enough space between my big cup and my temporary cup. It just starts to feel too full or heavy. And so that's when I start a new spindle. There is no right or wrong. You can do whatever feels best for you. I have watched people fit in crazy amount of fiber on their spindle, and I've seen people only do a little bitty bit. So it's really up to you. I do like to get the most bang for my buck that I can, just because I like to, you know, get it pretty full. It just feels right for me. But I don't want it to tax my hands. So I try not to overdo it. And then, yes, I transfer everything onto these little weaving bobbins. Come on, you silly goose. I saw you do it for a minute. You want to focus. There we go. So they're these little wooden guys. They are inexpensive. You can get different ones. These ones are Harrisville weaving bobbins. So I wind them onto there with my bobbin winder. That is the most easy, efficient way for me to do it. And I really, really love doing that. You don't have to have a bobbin winder. You don't have to have bobbins. You can absolutely wind them onto your thumb. Or I like to use a Nosta pin just because I find that I will turn my thumb purple and have a really hard time getting my little ball off of there. So this is actually, I just finished a big combo spin, and this is a little leftover ball of one of my colors. This braid just had a lot more fiber than my other two that I was playing to. Look how pretty. Ooh la la. So I did this on my Nosta pin. I have done that for my drop spindle spins. And then you can just save them till you're ready to start plying. And then you ply them. You decide you want 2-ply, 3-ply, what you're gonna make, and you go from there. So I know that was a pretty quick overview, but hopefully that was helpful to get you going. And I do think we all find our own way that we prefer. And for me, a little bit of it is efficiency. I found, before I found this method of getting them onto my bobbins, I would avoid plying. I would have all this fun spinning, especially on my drop spindles, but plying was kind of a roadblock for me because I was not finding a great way to get that single off of my spindle. And it just kind of deterred me from wanting to finish that yarn. So once I figured out this whole bobbin deal, I was like, okay, now I can make yarn the way I want to make it, and I'm enjoying every step of the process more. Again, when I first started support spindle spinning, I didn't do a temporary cut because it was too much for me. It didn't feel helpful until it did. So I think finding what works for you and trying different things out so you can explore that is the way to go. But congratulations, and I hope you enjoy this journey. I know I have fallen deep, deep in love with it. So good luck and have fun. All right, last question. Just popping in to say that I love the declutter, de-stash challenge idea and would 100% be down for it. Yay! I'm also curious to hear what items, crafty things you tend to hoard in good or not so good ways. For me, it's scraps of yarn for just in case. It's so hard to let go of the odds and ends from special skeins. So I feel you on that. I used to have a big old bin of odds and ends, little balls of yarn, even just like little scrappy things. And the fear of moths actually is what got me to finally be like, I'm not holding on to this anymore. One great thing is, if you have seen, a lot of us have like little free libraries around town where you'll see people put books. Well, cropping up now, every once in a while, you'll see that same idea, but it's for crafting supplies. And so that, I think, is a great place to put nice little odds and ends. I mean, don't just shove your your unwanted bits. But if you have like half a cake of yarn that you've held on to it, you're not going to use it, it's still in good condition, but you're not going to use it, it might be the perfect thing for somebody else. Like, there are plenty of fiber artists out there who use odds and ends for all kinds of cool things. So if it's a decent little ball of it, that can be a nice way to keep it out of the trash, but also not have it turn into trash in your space because it's just not getting used. So I do try, I've been there, same with swatches, and I no longer hold on to those things. I do think that there's also, if you do want to hold on to them, I think it can be fun to explore what you can do with them so they're being put to good use, whether it be weaving or stranded color work or scrappy projects. I mean, there's some really cool scrappy project designs out there, because it is, we all end up with these little bits, and I think a lot of us hold on to them with the best intentions, and then we're like, why are we holding on to this? So back to the rest of your question though. So you know what it is for me? It's things that I fear I will not be able to get in the future. And a big one for me is fiber. The thing with fiber is a lot of fiber dyers will do like one-of-a-kind colorway. And another one is even people who do repeat colorways. I think with fiber, it can be even more random than with yarn. And so I sometimes have this thing in my head of like, oh, what if I love it so much when I spin it and then I can't get more and I want to do a sweater or something, you know? So I tend to want to buy, and I know that this is a trap for yarn, for knitters as well, where we're like, we default to a sweater's quantity, which can make things get out of control pretty quickly. Or especially with, like, I have to be really careful about getting into the world of fleeces and things like that, because those are even more like that. Even if it's from the same sheep, a different season, a different age, like it won't ever be the same again. And so I can get a little bit like that and be like, oh, I need this. I used to be that way a little bit with crafting tools. I do have like probably more knitting needles than I need, things like that. So yeah, there are definitely things that are easy to collect. I have gotten pretty good at being generous with those things though. Like, one of the first things I did actually when I really got back into knitting, but realized I had moved on from some of the yarn and the needles I used to use that just whatever it may be. Maybe they weren't a color. You know, sometimes we think we're going to like something and then you get it and you're like, not my favorite. So I hosted like a learn how to knit class, and then I just let everyone take those needles and that yarn so that they could take them home and learn after we did our little class together. So there are things like that. And now I do try to reinforce like a waiting period. Like sometimes we think like, oh, I gotta have that. And if we just wait a minute, we're like, I don't need that. But yeah, it can definitely be fun to get some new crafting supplies. But I would say fiber right now is kind of my Achilles heel. Can we say that? Does that make any sense in this instance? But yeah, my like, ooh, I want. But yeah, besides that, not much. I don't think, nothing else pops in head. Oh, well, I did have a minute there with some support spindles. But again, it falls into that. You know what it is? It's an appreciation for the art form of others. I mean, some of those spindles, first of all, spindles are hard to come by. I think there are more spinners than there are spindle makers right now. And a lot of them are these like one-of-a-kind beautiful works of art. And so again, I think that's what gets me, is I'm like, this is my only opportunity. But I do try to tell myself there will always be more, you know? Okay, let's get into some show and tell. I had a little bit of a drought there of finishing my spins. I had a great week of finishing knits. Whew, I finished like 3 designs, and I actually was thinking about it this morning, and I'm like, you know, it's kind of like when it rains, it pours. I feel like I will go through this crafting moment of it just feels like I'm not finishing anything, and I'll get kind of itchy to try something new, do something new. And then all of a sudden I finish all the things. So that's kind of exciting. And I'm realizing I don't even have the thing I want to share. So I'm going to grab that real quick. Okay. So I finally finished some yarn. Okay. I finished this massive, I think I was talking about finishing it last week. It was probably going into the bath last week when I filmed, I think. But this mega skein is over 8.5 ounces, spindle spun, long draw into a gradient. The fiber's from Inglenook Fibers. It is one of their gradient, they're sticklebats, and I spun it as a gradient. And I have not gotten specs. All I know is it weighs over 8.5 ounces. I mean, this is not a small skein of yarn. It is luscious. I kind of think it would be cute as a sweater for my daughter. I'm gonna see what she thinks of these colors. She's a really different one. And it is, you know what about spindle spun yarn? It's so soft. It's just, you could just fall asleep on it. It's just dreamy. It's dreamy. So finish this bad boy. Then, because I hadn't finished anything in forever, I was like, I just need a quick and dirty, gotta get her done kind of a spin. So I think I maybe showed the bobbins last week. I can't remember. It all blurs together. But this is from Wound Up Fiber Arts. And I actually just saw the tag. I know I showed something about this last week because I remember not having the tag. And then I found it. And now I've lost it again. But it's this beautiful giant, what is with this? Oh, that's just the yarn I used to tie it up with, which does not have nearly as much twist as my yarn. Okay, so this beauty, so squishy, so squishy. This is a super sock blend from Wound Up Fiber Arts. So it is superwash merino and nylon, slippery degree dock. So I don't always go for a superwash, but she had spun it up and I was like, I want to try that out. And mine's so different than hers and so fun. I love seeing how same colorway can spin up so differently. This has a lot of white in it and I really wanted to play with a skein that was dyed that way. The color application as well was kind of more smaller bits of color. You know, sometimes some braids will have big segments of kind of solid colors where this was more splashes of color. And I already want to play, maybe Trish should try some more of this, because now I'm like, oh, I want to see if I had done things a little differently, then what would happen. So I'm having fun playing right now. And anyways, it is so soft and squishy and delightful. And I'm tickled with how it turned out. It's gotta be around a worsted weight, I think. So I also tried to spin thicker. One thing that many of us find is once we've been spinning for a while, we spin fine. So it can be sometimes hard to spin thick again. So I do like to practice that so that I have that as a choice. Then I was inspired. I watched a class on School of Sweet Georgia. It was Kim McKenna's Spin a Braid 5 Ways. And so fun, so inspiring. And she did a lot of dizzing. So I officially have a diz. If you don't know what a diz is, it looks like a button with little holes in it. And you pull the fiber in there. And go check out School of Sweet Georgia and Kim McKenna if you want to know all about dizzing, because she does it quite a bit. And anyway, she had this one skein and she calls it Rill, R-I-L-L. And basically it's 2 dizzed strips of yarn that she ends up spinning together. So I was inspired by that, and by Jillian Moreno in her book, Yarn of Texture. She goes over holding 2 braided tops together and drafting them together that way as a type of combo spin. So I was inspired by those, and I had this beautiful braid from Inglenook, and I'm like, I want to see if I can get kind of a heathered look. So what I did is I took my braid and I stripped it down into almost like pencil roving. So it's these thin little guys. And then what I'm doing is I'm holding 2 strands of it together. But like for this one, I would choose, let's see what's at the other end. I look at what end, because I don't really want the colors to line up. So I would do it like this so that the colors aren't matching. Like I wouldn't want this red and red together. But then you just hold them together and then you draft them together. So I'm just doing a short forward. And then this is what it looks like. So here's my bobbin. This is the first bobbin. I'm going to do a 3-ply. And so it's all this little like barber pulled, heathered, almost tweedy. I'm so excited. I don't know what's going to happen. It might not look great when I'm done, or it might be the coolest thing ever. So we're gonna find out. But anyways, I'm really excited about it. There are some contrasting colors in here, complementary, that's what I meant to say. So we'll have to see. I do think it's a method that can play out really well with more, what's the word I want? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. That is gonna drive me crazy. Anyways, colors near each other on the color wheel. Somebody's out there shouting to me, it's this. It starts with an A. Anyways, moving on. I do think if it was a little more monochromatic or a little closer to each other on the color wheel, I think that would also create a really, really beautiful heathered look where you wouldn't have to worry so much about maybe any muddying. I'm hoping that with the colors in here that are complementary colors, that they are going to work still well together. So we'll see. I also don't know if maybe 3-plies is going to be too much blending of all those colors together, or maybe I'm a genius. Time will tell. Okay, last show and tell. I just got out of the bath. I just finished Major Combo Spin. And I haven't even snapped it yet. It's literally still rolled up in the towel. So this, if you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen, I think maybe even I showed it on here too. But I showed how I pick some braids to do a combo spin. Well, here we go. I finally finished my combo spin. So this is what it's looking like. I mean, this is damp, it's wet, it has not fluffed its stuff yet, but I'll tell you what, I'm tickled. I'm pretty tickled with it. So I've got 2, so this is about 12 ounces of fiber because it was 3 braids. And so I don't want to really handle a 12-ounce mega skein. So I do have it roughly divided in half. But there we go. Look at all that luscious yarn. Ooh la la. Ooh la la. So I'm going to go hang this up to dry. That's all my show and tell. I've got to go get some knitting done. Next week, if you are not subscribed to the newsletter, now is the time, because next week, the pattern for this year's May Knit Along Challenge is coming out. And newsletter subscribers get a little discount and all the early details for the Knit Along Challenge. So you can find a link for that right below in the show notes. And I think that's all I got. I hope you get to make something this weekend, even if it's just memories with people you love. And let me know what you're going to be up to. And I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.